So let's just start. I mean, you've had such a truly remarkable career. Could you walk us through it a little bit, please?
Sure. Well, I think Sue covered it pretty well. You know, it sounds also like formal and serious, you know, when somebody reads your bio. But I think my career has really been just a series of serendipity things, you know, that have happened. My first job I got because I happened to answer the phone when I was home on spring break, and it was the wife of the head of a huge retail chain, and she asked me about University of Texas, where I had went because her son was going there, and I told her all the things that I had done, and you know, then I got hired there. And then a sorority sister called me who was at Coca-Cola, met her, and wound up being at Coca-Cola for a decade. But the best story was how I became the CEO of Spanx. No recruiters. You know, I didn't call anybody that I knew. I was just shopping. And I was going to a party on Saturday night, and I had just had my third son and was still kind of fat from, you know, had a little baby weight, maybe is a nicer way to say it, and called this woman that I was mentoring in an organization and said, you know, I've been renovating the house, I still have this baby weight, what do I wear to this party? And she said that Spanx had just come out with control top fishnets. And I said, that's great. You know, you don't get grid butt from sitting on the fishnets, and it'll tuck in my tummy a bit. And when I went to Saks to buy the fishnets, they were all sold out of the product in multiple sizes and colors. And as I was sitting there talking to the sales manager about supply chain management and vendor replenishment programs, and why they should not be out of their fishnets, the founder of Spanx' boyfriend overheard me and started calling me on his cell phone, and that's how I became the CEO of Spanx. So you never know what can happen when you go shopping.
One of the things when you did that, you know, when you moved, you were at Coke and you had a very senior global position, and then you moved to Spanx. And it was, you know, as a startup then, so really you took a risk. A lot of women, a lot of people in general are nervous to take risks in their career. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, I think a close cousin to fear of failure is, you know, fear of taking risks. And I think that fear can, you know, take a hold of you in different ways. You know, sometimes it can stop you cold in your tracks and make you afraid to do the changes that you need to get yourself out of a certain circumstance. But fear can also incite a revolution because you're determined to make the changes that you need to. And I have always found that you know, inciting the revolution was a great way to go because it just, you know, makes you stronger. And as you look at things in a positive way and you say, you know, the only thing to fear is fear itself. We all know that expression. I think it's really true. And to me, I've always come out of any, you know, fearful situation saying all that means is that I care. You know, when I feel scared, if I'm sitting here before, you know, getting up to talk to all of you, saying, I'm a little nervous about this. This is a big room of people, and it only means that I want to do a great job. And so you just have to move through that.
So that's a life lesson, and I know you're very much about life lessons. So could you share a few life lessons with us that are particularly important?
You know, I think probably the thing that I always felt that maybe I wasn't so great about was I never thought I was a great listener. I was the oldest of three. My father was very serious about hard work and discipline, and we would sit at the dinner table every night, and he would have like this little pile of quarters next to, you know, his plate, and he would ask us questions. And it was like, talk about getting a stomach ache when you're eating, you know. And with my dad, it was like you had to have the right answer. And he would ask us random things like, you know, what animal has the longest lifespan, or, you know, what's the word for heaven in Greek mythology, or whatever they were. And he never asked a question that he didn't have the right answer to. And I really grew up learning that, it was my job to always have the right answer. And as I progressed in my career, I really realized that, I was very determined to always think that there was one right solution to every problem, and I was going to be the one to find it. And things, I think, happen and experiences happen that really change you. And one for me was a conversation that I had with a Native American woman. And I always joke and say, it was supposed to have happened on a mountaintop in New Mexico at sunrise. But it was actually a hotel bar in Las Vegas. And she told me that in her culture, there was no such thing as truth. For any different question, there were 7 different answers. For any problem, there were shades of possibilities. And, it really got me thinking, was I so determined that I was going to find the right answer to the right question that I was really ignoring a lot of the information that was coming in and not being as great a listener as I could be. And once you realize that, solutions can come from multiple places and those solutions can leave you in multiple directions, life gets a lot easier. The solutions get better, and you're in a much better place.
See, my dad is a philosopher, so at our dinner table, there were all these open-ended questions. No quarter could possibly, you could not win a quarter. Let's segue a little bit into change, because I think, along the lines of risk, change is something that is scary to a lot of people. You're going through a change yourself.
Yes.
You've had one career, your path is changing. Could you talk a little bit about how that is affecting you and how to look at change?
Whenever you leave one thing to the next thing, you always have to let go of what came before. And I use the analogy of, a trapeze bar. We all want to hold on tight to the bar because if we let go, we're fearful we're going to fall to the ground. But what happens if you never let go is that you just kind of keep swinging back and forth, and you lose a lot of momentum. So I highly recommend, when you're on the upswing, letting go of the handle, the trapeze bar, even if you don't know that there's a second bar to catch at the time. It's a great way to gain perspective and get your heart beating and, really take time and take stock of, what you want to do next. So leaving Spanx was just, on an upswing. I mean, we had had our best year ever. I had had a wonderful time growing that company, taking it from a single product to multiple products to category leadership to, having women from Savannah to Singapore, wearing Spanx in 60 different countries. But I had to ask myself, what was going to be the next 5 years like if I didn't leave? And I knew that my personal growth was going to start to decline. And, like the trapeze bar, I was going to lose momentum. And I was having a breakfast with Mickey Drexler in Paris, and he kept saying, what's your next gig? What's going to be your next gig? And I kept thinking, but I'm just so happy where I am, And I realized after that breakfast that, it's really about challenging yourself that helps you to grow, and that even though I was happy, that was not going to continue to be the case.
And you had said something interesting when we were talking before about change too, which is you change, but you can change again. So.
Exactly, yeah. The only thing that I think you cannot go back on is having children. I think kind of once you make that decision, that's kind of a permanent decision. But besides that, I mean, there's almost anything that, you can't change. I change handbags and shoes all day long. And I am a proponent of change, but I think you can't look at it so seriously that, oh my God, this is like, if I do this, it'll be like forever. Like, it's really not forever. It could only be for a month, I remember signing my first lease on an apartment, and it was 6 months, and I said, oh my God, how am I ever going to get out of this? It's like 6 months. But, most things you can zig and zag and make a chicken scratch path, and if, they're not going the way that you think they're going, you just adapt and move in a different direction.
So changing gears a little bit, in her opening remarks introducing you, Sue said, who in this room probably isn't wearing Spanx? Well, you're probably not wearing Spanx, but...
That is a big misconception, by the way. Extra smalls were one of our very best sellers.
Is that true?
It has absolutely nothing to do with size.
And that's really what I wanted to talk about women's insecurities. I think, Spanx in so many ways, it addresses women's insecurities in regards to their looks. So I'm curious, how do you think, being around this now, how do you think image, and perhaps more importantly, women's perceived images of themselves affect them in terms of success?
People will come up to me sometimes and say, you are just like the most confident person. How can you just always be so confident? And I would just laugh and say, I am the most insecure, confident person you've ever met. I'm confident in my competencies. I'm confident that I can do the things that I say that I'm going to do. But, we all have insecurities, and I really think that the insecurity is what drives you. It's the little engine that says, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better. I think with Spanx, I really realized very early on that the brand was not at all about products. It was about building self-esteem. And if we could help women feel better in the clothes they wore by solving wardrobe problems for them, we could really change how they felt about themselves. And the magic, and all of you guys laughed when Sue brought up, people wearing Spanx. And I always hear that, so clearly that it's a giggle, right? And that giggle is because we were able to find humor and openness about talking about, issues that you never talk about. Nobody ever, talked about, their pooch or their muffin top or grid butt or, the outer banks of your bra. By really making it okay to the process of sharing, women got more confident about talking about their problem areas and not having it be this shameful thing, that they could never discuss. And I think that, all of us as women, when we unload, and men over there, I see a lot of men over there, when you share a problem with somebody else, it all of a sudden lightens your load. And, the person that you're talking to can say, oh my God, you're worried about that? That's no big deal at all. And so I think it's about being open.
And admitting, your insecurities. And
Right.
I think it's great to hear somebody like you who has been so successful say, listen, I'm confident in myself, but at the same time, I feel just as you all feel. And it's great to hear that. Now, Spanx really does have amazing products, and you have been able to create real brand ambassadors. Even with terrific products, that's hard to do. And you talk about brand advocacy, which is really brand ambassadors. Can you talk a little bit about how you create that, and then also how you sustain that?
I think we live in a recommendation economy now. People are much more concerned about hearing what other people think about products or services than they are about listening to marketers tell them why their products are so good. And I think, at first you have to really start with great products. And at Spanx, I used to say, one of two things can happen every time somebody puts on Spanx. Our brand can get stronger or our brand can get weaker. We can either gain leverage or we lose leverage. And I would talk about that to the product development people as a way to really get them to focus on product quality and realize how fragile that relationship with the consumer, is. I mean, you're only one experience or one bad experience away from hurting your brand. So we would always, focus on the fact that the relationship with the woman we were selling to was more important than the immediate transaction we were about to have. And the brand was always more important than the revenue. And I think if you kind of hold those guardrails clearly in sight, consumers will do the right thing. And you guys love to talk about products that you love. There's something cool about it that attaches you to it, and you want to talk about things that are cool and have conversation value. And I think that's why Spanx was so successful.
And like you said, there's no question that it goes back to having terrific products. Mm-hmm. Having said that, a lot of companies have terrific products, and you never hear about them. So can you talk a little bit about some of the ways, as the CEO, you were able to grow Spanx?
I mean, everybody talks about, the traditional growth levers. You want to focus on increasing your distribution, and you want to focus on, expanding your product line, and you want to focus on, different price points. But in the end, you have to be cool. And, people want to buy products from cool companies, and cool companies have to have cool leaders and cool people working for them. And I know it sounds like so simple, but, really you have to, to have winners, and you have to create conversation value, and you have to take risks so that you keep moving. What cool people do you know that don't take risks? I mean, they're not cool. The people that you always admire and think, whether it's in high school, the guy that went up and asked, the prettiest girl for the date. People admire people who take risks. And so at the company, we had to constantly be doing things that we weren't sure we could do. They were always objectives that were higher than what we thought we could accomplish. And, people were doing things that, their resumes did not say that they had the experience to do. And then they had great stories to tell about the success that they had, and success breeds success, and so that's how I think it works.
And part of it also is creating a culture where the most talented people want to be. And
That's
I think
exactly right.
That's something that a lot of companies, whatever that is for them, think about. And you've talked in articles in the past about ways that you were able to create a culture where creativity lived. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
One thing that is really a surprise that I spoke about many years ago is that the most creative solutions come when you're in a box. Most people think the world is your oyster. You can come up with any idea that you want to, but your best ideas come when you're on a budget, when you have a tight timeline, when you have constraints. So you really need to welcome the box around you. I realized that when we were building our house. And, we had a certain budget that we were gonna, have to meet. And instead of just going and trying to find the most expensive things, we said, okay, well, with this money, what could we really do? I also think you just need to make people feel comfortable. And, I would walk around the office, I would take my shoes off, I would sit on the floor if we were, sitting against a wall trying to, look at new product development. I would go try products on. So, just making it like people feeling comfortable. It's just like being at a party or being anywhere. People, when they're comfortable, they're themselves, and then they're only thinking about, how their mind can work the best, not back to fear, what are people thinking of me and what should I say or do next.
And in order to retain the best people, because really your company is as good as the people that are in it, do you have any tips on ways that you were able to retain the best people to stay?
I think giving them a lot of rope, and demanding expectations at the same time. I think you have to create a love-hate relationship with the people that you work for. They absolutely hate you when you demand the impossible, but when you nurture them and help them and they achieve the impossible that they didn't think that they were able to achieve before, that is really when they love you and they come back for more. Nothing would really get me upset at the office, but one thing that I would get so upset I'd have to get up and walk out of the room. And it was when somebody said I can't. Because when you're saying I can't, I'm really asking, tell me the troubles, tell me the hurdles, tell me that you think I'm absolutely crazy, but don't say I can't. Because when you say I can't, you're really saying I won't. I won't try it, I won't risk it, I won't consider it. And, those won'ts are really what kills any organization. And I would not, tolerate that in people, but then the best people would rise to the occasion. And, the people that were not rising to the occasion, I really felt the right thing to do was, to make sure they weren't part of the organization.
So switching gears a little bit, there's no question that the conversation about women has been extremely elevated in the last couple of years. especially with Lean In and just in so many different ways. You have a slightly different take on being a female CEO than what I was expecting when I first met you. Could you share your take about being a female executive with everyone?
Okay, so I can't remember who it was, but somebody here, and when I was out in the pre-area reception, came up to me and said, I can't wait to hear your war stories about, working in a male-dominated world and how bad they were. And I really have to answer that by saying I don't understand the question because it never happened to me. I worked at Coca-Cola. I was routinely, the only woman in a room of guys, most of whom's wives did not work. And I just really never had that experience. I always felt that being a woman was this huge benefit. And it is really different, but as I talk to more and more women, it's like, even though everybody, I totally believe in equal pay and equal rights, but what I don't think is that, I should consider myself a female CEO before I consider myself a CEO. I want to be the best CEO I can be. I don't want affirmative action because I'm a female CEO. And as I talk to younger women, they really do not see it as much as maybe, my generation did. Being with guys and figuring out how to work well with, half of the population, is really important. And this one woman came up to me and said, I wish instead of going to all these women's group things, which can be very positive, and I love my women's group, so I'm not at all being negative about that. She said, but I felt like I missed some opportunities to also, be with the guys doing their fraternity kind of things and understanding how I can get ahead. So I think that my point of view is not against equalness of women and women being all they can be, because we have such a wonderful advantage that we are so good at supporting each other. But I do think that we shouldn't look for problems. I think we should, assume the sale, assume we're going to be accepted, that we are going to be fabulous, that we're, going to get the job done, and not have in the back of our mind that somehow because we're a woman, we aren't as good in some ways, because I think we're actually have an advantage.
I think that's an excellent point, and I also think your point, it's very important to have groups where we could talk, women can talk amongst themselves, but as Laurie has said before, you need to have more men as well, and it's great that there are some here because otherwise you're in an echo chamber. Your way of thinking is very, very positive, but you mentioned, you were in the room a lot of times with a bunch of men that, had wives that didn't work. You feeling that way doesn't necessarily mean that the men that you're with feel that way and that they don't see you as a female CEO. Sheryl Sandberg says, act more like a man, or that's what I took from Lean In.
Right. I think act more like yourself. I don't, we can clap for that.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to, be the best that I can be for myself, and I really don't spend too much time worrying about what the guys are thinking. If a guy's sitting there thinking, he likes my dress, that's nice. I'm not offended by that. I just think that we need to focus on getting the job done and being inclusive and getting along and diversity of ideas and being a good listener. And, men and women, it's been going on for a long time, but, a lot of times we're kind of our best in front of each other too. We help each other raise the game, and I think that's kind of a genetic thing that can happen, too. So as you can probably tell, I'm a positive thinker. And, that is, that positive visualization of things going well and of having success at whatever we do, I think can overcome and be a much better way to deal with, maybe perceived issues, maybe even if they're real issues. Maybe there are like 3 guys that are total pigs, in the room. So don't deal with them, still be the best that you can be and let them be the ones that have to change.
So one of the things about being a female CEO, however, is I know you're a mom to 3 boys and you're happily married and you're involved in philanthropy and mentoring and many, many things. So I'm going to ask you something which I know you already don't like, which is I'm very interested in work-life balance and how very successful women like you achieve some semblance of balance or whatever you would like to call it. So can you share that with us, please?
Okay, so there were these 2 dogs, and one was a puppy and one was an older dog. And the puppy says to the older dog, I have discovered something very interesting, that happiness is in my tail, and I am going to chase it and chase it and chase it until happiness is mine. And the older dog said, I agree with you that happiness is in your tail, but I have found that the more I chase it, the more it disappears. So I've also found that if I live my life the best way that I can, it follows me around. So I think that's what I've learned. I've learned that if you just live the best life that you can, happiness is the consequence. And, when you get really, I call it holding on tight to the steering wheel, you get like, I've got to accomplish everything, and oh my God, I have to do this by 11, and I've got to pick up my kids, and one of them's sick, and he's got to go to the doctor, but I have the PowerPoint presentation I've got to do, and you just get yourself like so worked up. There's no such thing as balance. Every day, stuff happens, right? You wake up, you work from the minute you get up in the morning to the minute you go to sleep, at least I do, and it should be fun the entire time. And sometimes when I'm at work, I'm dealing with things that are happening at home, and there are many times that I'm at home dealing with things that are at work, and there's things that I'm learning from people in my philanthropy organizations that I take back to my family and my work. So it's just really a blending of seeing one life and making that life, as happy and fulfilling as you possibly can. And I think that when you start trying to bucket things is when it gets more complicated. And that's why, I think work and life is work. And work is life. And so it's just one concept to me. It's not 2 different things.
So a lot of women that work very, very hard and have their personal life and their work life, they always are going through feeling a sense of guilt somewhere. Like you were saying, when you have so many things to do, are you able to sort of put that to the side?
I feel guilty all the time, but the guilt... But the guilt, I think, is just kind of like a DNA thing with me. I just heard somebody talking, and they were talking. It was actually my rabbi. It was at a sermon he gave over Rosh Hashanah last month. And he talked about, things happening to people, and that people either have, one of 3 reactions to things when they go bad. Either they feel guilty, I raise my hand, I'm the one that always feels guilty. How could I have stopped the recession? I should have done something about that. Or, they blame somebody else, it's somebody else's fault, it's like, my husband can't work the computer. He's like, I can't believe that Apple made it this way. And I'm like, just click on the right over there. And, so there are people that blame people, and then there are people that put their head in their sand and just, kind of deny that, they have a problem at all. So the feeling guilty is just, it's just, some of us just have that. And that doesn't, you just have to realize it's probably a chemical in your brain and not, actually something that's, external that's happening to you. And, that's why people take drugs. Yeah, there are a lot of things that will cure guilt that, if you take them. But I think mostly, just focusing on, not the extraneous stuff and, relationships with people and accomplishing things that you're proud of.
This is all great advice, and I wanted to move on to advice in terms of mentorship. I know you're very interested in mentorship and that you're a mentor yourself, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and specifically how people can best take advantage of groups like this one.
I think you have to be kind of looking, for lessons. And, mentors are not always just, I think people have formal ideas of mentors. We have now signed a contract. You are the mentor, I am the mentee, we are going to meet once a week. And mentors are really just, anybody. I think if you are open to learning, there are a million people and ways that you can learn. And the openness is more important than, like going out and making a project to find a mentor.
So Arianna Huffington talks in her book Thrive a lot about finding ways to decompress. I interviewed her once and she said you have to gently escort your digital devices out of your bedroom in the evening. And I'm just curious, what is sort of the ways that you find you're able to decompress? Because as it turned out, leaving Spanx didn't stop you from being really busy.
Right. Some people say getting rid of your phone, makes you relax more. I don't know, to me it might make me more stressful. Like, Sue, can you check my phone right now? It's in my purse right there, and make sure I don't have any messages. I love to run. I've run my whole life. And that seems to, be a time when I can just kind of decompress. But I will spend literally sometimes an hour like looking at stuff on eBay. Like, I don't even know what it is that I really want, but there's just something relaxing about, looking at it. It's commerce, so I look at it from a business perspective. I wonder how much this is going to sell for. I wonder who the woman is that's selling this. Why is she selling it? That's a really cute dress. Do you think she had a bad experience in that dress? But it's just like mindless, and relaxing to me. When people talk about like every day for an hour, you have to, relax. I don't know. Some days I don't want to relax at all. I'm on a high and I feel great and I want to keep going. And, other times I get stressed out and I feel like if I get stressed, it'll just keep like spiraling into, I have a habit of doing that. I'm stressed. Well, let me do more. Well, then I'm getting more stressed. Well, let me do more to make sure that I'm de-stressing myself and accomplishing something. So you have to realize when the spiral is going in the wrong direction. And when that spiral is going in the wrong direction, that's the time to go, sit on eBay or play with the dogs.
I like One King's Lane personally. I don't know if you've ever tried that.
That's a great one too.
It's a good one. So looking back now, having had this great time at Spanx, I'm wondering if there's maybe 2 or 3 key things you learned being a leader specifically of what began as a startup that you could share with us.
There were some things that I kind of messed up. One of them, which, I was unintentional, is that, when you start with a company and there's like, 3 or 4 of you and, your office is the kitchen of a duplex, which is how I started at Spanx. I always just thought that like everybody knew me and everybody liked me. Well, it turns out that everybody in the organization did not like me. And I asked my HR person, I said, I want to make sure that as the organization gets bigger, I'm doing the right things. He's like, well, you're doing a lot of things wrong. One of the things that I was doing wrong was we were on the 18th floor, and I routinely would get in the elevator with somebody, usually who I didn't know because I'm terrible with names, and I would go from the 18th floor to the lobby. So, sometimes I would be on my phone, like, getting in another email, and then they would feel ignored. And one time I said, I didn't remember the woman's name in product development, but she was like a creative person, so I thought, she was expressing herself with her clothes, and I said, those are really cool, green sandals that you have on. So my HR guy comes in a couple days later and says, okay, all they're talking about now is the fact that, you only care what people wear and you don't care anything about, what they have to say. I said, oh my God, how is that possible? I just said, I know where that came from. I talked about her green sandals. But, it was a really important lesson because, I had to realize that as the CEO of a big organization, I was a public figure, and they were looking at me and examining every single thing that I said and did, and, as a way not to criticize me, but as a way to get to know me. And that's why I think that this format is so better when we're talking like this than kind of giving a keynote. So I had to change my behavior in the elevator, and, I would never be on the phone because I can see how that would be perceived, negatively. Instead of, commenting or judging what somebody was wearing, I would always ask a question, how was your day? where are you going tonight? And, building a relationship in that way just made me so much, more approachable. But then there were like bigger things, like, knowing when to change process. There are times as an organization grows that things that were working stop working. Maybe they don't work at all, and maybe they start working against you. And I think in organizations, you have to know when you kind of have to detach from, something that worked very well in the past that's not working well now. And you have to be really, really intuitively aware of that. And those are the times when you have to, go slow to go fast. And we all feel in organizations that, are growing and there's so much momentum, that we just have to work faster. And I think sometimes you have to try softer than try harder. Slow down, get some perspective, look at what you're doing, look at it objectively. And there were many times at Spanx that I either waited too long, or I caught it on the tail of end of something that I wish I would have caught earlier, where you had to kind of completely redo everything.
So we've talked a lot about Spanx.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about the rest of your career. What's next for you?
Well, I can't wait to find out. I'm just having so much fun. It's kind of like, being married for a long time and, getting a divorce and being single and being able to date. And that's what I'm doing. I'm having all these wonderful dates with really interesting people who want me to do all kinds of things. It's very validating, honestly. It's also scary, on the other hand, to have so many opportunities, to choose from. But the most advice that people who have gone through transitions before me has given me is take your time, take your time, take your time, take your time. Every single person has told me that. And I think it's because your perspective changes. I mean, when I first left Spanx, I was, still kind of on this huge adrenaline rush. And then I started meeting people, and every, month it's changed my idea of maybe what I want to do or what I don't want to do. So I'm continuing to do my board stuff. I have a wonderful group of women and men that I'm mentoring that have smaller organizations that I don't want to get paid for, and I just want to kind of pay it forward as a way of helping, and people helped me. And I have two things that I'm most interested in right now that I'm not ready to talk about, but it's kind of like, I'll know when I know. And, I either get more energy towards things and I go on like the third and the fourth date, or I start thinking, this just isn't the guy for me, and I have to back off. But in the meantime, I have this burning curiosity, and whatever, this time is just so valuable as a learning and personal growth time to, get me on my way to whatever the next thing I do next.
You've given us great words of wisdom throughout, but I just like to end and just say, if you have one particular piece of advice that has really helped guide you through your career, what would it be?
My mom gave me the best advice, and she said that the best things in life are free. And that has meant so much to me in business situations and personal situations. And I think what she's trying to tell me is that it's not about power, possessions, prestige. It's really about, being with people that you love and doing things that you love. And I think from a career perspective or a personal perspective, that seems to keep me on the right path. When I'm doing something that I love with people that I love, I always know that I'm doing the right thing.
That's terrific. Thank you. It was great to talk to you.